Introducing the Value Palette. It has a glass surface that's easy to clean, an adjustable drafting table hinge for easy up and down movement, and a sealed paint storage with a piano hinge. See how easy that is? All right, maybe it's not this awesome thing that I started to introduce, but it works for me. And it has a ratchet system, which is pretty nice. It took me a while to be able to find these online, and they were pretty pricey, but the ratcheting hinge allows me to stop them at any point. I had to install door hinges at the bottom so that the top of the palette wouldn't flip out, because drafting table hinges are not in the middle of the palette. It's a pretty large palette. It's 30 by 40 inches. It is very user-friendly. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What I did, I took an old MDF drafting table that was already painted black, or is possibly a black melamine surface that was on the top of it, and I painted each of those areas with a different value. You can see here towards the left, it is a value 9. That I painted on there. Next to it is a value 8, which is about twice the width. And the next one is a value 7. Here we go, checking it. Yep, value 7 matches up pretty good. You can see how they match up when you lay the Munsell value system right next to it. I was trying to match the hue value chroma of the Munsell value system. This thing cost me about $100, which isn't too expensive, but to be able to get these values correct, I wanted to make sure that I got them all done in the right manner. Going from value 6 to value 5, you can see that they are generally matching up. They're pretty darn close, if not spot on. And it is hard to get these things spot on, but generally close is good enough. If we go to value 4, you can see I was just a little bit off on value 4. And when I get into these darker values, because the oil paint has dried, it tends to dry just a little bit lighter unless I put in some type of medium that makes it a little bit more glossy. Then it will dry at the right value. You can see here value 2 is just a little bit too light, and then value 1 at the very end is also too light. But I have value 5 in the center. That's the largest band of values. The other thing that I learned when making these is make sure that you mix your paints really, really well. I mean, I thought I mixed them pretty good, but there was an issue with it, and there were a little bit of lighter streaks that were coming through. Now I'm adding the glass surface to it so that I can just clean the glass surface and not affect the value. One thing that I did not consider, which I think you will because you're watching this video right now, is that the value actually gets darker when you put glass over the painted surface. I didn't think it would get that much darker, but in reality, it dropped it basically a half a value. So if we look at this value 8 right there, it's at a 7.5. So that's supposed to be at a value 8, but with the glass over it, it drops it down to a 7.5. If I go to a value 5 in the middle there, and I place it down onto the surface, you can see it is slightly darker than that value. So if I swing it open and go to value 4.5, which again is half a value, it matches pretty good. How do you know if it's matching? If the edge between Munsell disappears, the value that you have mixed or painted, that means that you've dialed in the correct value. So here we go with mixing the colors. Why on earth would I make a value palette? Here I'm mixing a value 5, and I placed it at the value 8. Look at how dark it is at value 8. And then I take that same value 5 mixture and it's like a 5.5. And I place it down over by the value 3, and you can see how light it actually looks. So the problem that I found is that when I was mixing my colors, I had either a white palette or a black palette or a gray palette. And I would mix it up thinking that I was in the correct ballpark with my value until I put it on my surface. Then when I painted on the surface, the value was way off. I mean, maybe not way off, but a value or 2 off made a huge difference to me. What I'm doing here is I'm just figuring out what value section am I working in. If it's a flesh tone, is it a value 7? Is it a value 8? And then I make my mixture in that value band. And I made them a long band so that I can mix different colors that are the same value, or different hues that are the same value. So you can see here again, I'm mixing a value 5. I made it a little bit darker in value, and then I added some white to it so that I could get a mixture. Now it's a little bit more green than what is there, but that's what I'm going for in this painting. I'm using the palette knife to apply that paint. I want it more of a textured surface because it's concrete that these nice little plums are sitting on. And so I want to have that texture and a little bit of subtle variation within the texture. Subtle variation of texture, subtle variation of color. So I'm using the palette knife to kind of place that in there. And you can see if I get the value correct on the palette, like here it is at a value 5, then I can put it in that shadow area just by changing a little bit of the color. Changing the color, and then I'm placing it onto the canvas to be able to change that hue slightly, but not really the value. You're really wanting to focus on compressing colors and values. This, I feel like, is a really good way to be able to do it. You can see I take that slightly lighter value, I'm painting in there, I'm mixing it with that darker value, again, focusing on that texture, be able to create a little bit more variety and interest in the surface to make it look a little bit more like a concrete surface. But I'm mixing that lighter value with the darker because that's the color change that I'm wanting to occur here on the second layer. I've made this palette because I want to have more control over my values and colors when I'm painting. If I have the same value on the palette, then it's harder for me to see that change in value in the area that I'm trying to paint in. And this allows me to match the value, generally, to whatever paint I'm going to apply, and I'm not very far off. Not only does this put me in the correct general value, but it gets me a lot closer to the correct value that I'm trying to create. If I am at value 5, I can make a mixture that is a value 5.5 or a mixture that is a 4.5 and know that it's still really, really close to the correct value. This is why I made this palette, and so far it's actually really working out for me. I've done multiple paintings now with this palette, and I've enjoyed the experience of being able to just quickly set up and figure out what value I'm mixing on. Now, the things that I would fix in the future, knowing full well that this 1/4 inch glass is going to make everything half a value darker, I would try to make all of my values that I painted in there half a value lighter. So when I put the glass over the top of it, it would actually be the correct value. But that's for version number 2. So if you're deciding to make this palette for yourself, I would highly recommend going that route. So while I'm painting, I'm going to talk to you about what I did to make this palette. I basically took an old drafting table, melamine surface, freehand painted these values after getting the Munsell color or value checker. I matched the values with the correct value in the Munsell color system. I was trying to use the correct tonal change in terms of value, but also in terms of hue. So I used a little bit of black, raw umber, depending upon which raw umber you use, but it was mostly around a 50-50 mix of raw umber and black. And then I would add white to the mixture. I also used some Galkid so that it would dry faster on the palette. And then I painted over the surface. Then I went to the next value, made that mixture, a large amount of it, painted it on the surface. You want to make sure that it's opaque so that you don't get too much variation in your value. So opaque, thick colors, placed it on there, let it dry after I got all 9 values painted in there. value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Made smaller bands in value 9 and value 1 because those values are not used as much by me. I like to keep most of my values in the middle range because I'm able to control the chroma of each color a lot better. Chroma meaning saturation of the color. So after I've painted all those in, I let them fully dry. Again, make sure that they're mixed really, really well when you're painting these in so that you don't run into the same problem that I had. I've subtle little variations of value, but it's more of like a quarter value change, not much of a difference. After painting those all in and letting them cure, I placed the glass over the top, and then I created the nice little painting storage that I placed at the top using a piano hinge to secure it. That was made out of plexiglass. I basically cut it with a table saw, a fine ferrule blade table saw so that it would be cut nice and clear and not shatter the plexiglass everywhere. So make sure you get the right tools to be able to make those cuts. It's totally enclosed, a little bit longer, a quarter of an inch towards the back where the piano hinge is secured so that when I close it, it goes flush on top of the glass. And I can open and close that. Downside to that is it doesn't lock open. So I take a clamp and I clamp it open when I'm working, especially with the palette placed vertically. Now, how do I keep the paints wet and not mix in a slow dryer with all the paints so I can use my paints more often? Well, this is why you use clove oil. So here I have taken a cotton ball and some clove oil. doTERRA, don't worry, I'm not advertising for them. That's just what I had available. So I'm taking this clove oil and I put about 3 or 4 drops on that cotton ball and place the cotton ball inside the storage container. And what this does is the clove oil absorbs the oxygen in the storage container instead of the paint. Oil paint, cures, meaning it absorbs oxygen into the paint film and it makes it into a nice firm paint film. And the clove oil makes it so that the oxygen goes to the clove oil and not to the paint. Now, because this paint storage is so big, I actually now have 2 cotton balls. That's right, 2. I might even go to 3 and put some clove oil in there so that it keeps the paint wet longer. And it usually extends it a couple of days. Here you go from the view of the cotton ball and all of my paints that I have in there. Don't worry, I don't use all these paints all the time. I mostly use just 3 or 4 colors, but that's for a different video. I hope this video was informative and helpful. Maybe you could make a palette and let me know what you think about this. What do you think are the pros and cons with having these bands of values that are going across there? I think I figured them all out, but you never know. I'm open to whatever can make this a better palette. But I thought I'd introduce it to all of you and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, whatever they may be. And I will catch you on the next one.